Alrighty, here we are, Cosmic Lion Productions, and hey, this is Cosmic Lion Radio, and we're live with Shelly Bond, talking about the brand new i-DOPPELGängER Kickstarter that launched yesterday. It's amazing, it's humongous. We've got two guests on the panel with us today, who just so happen to be Cosmic Lion creators and amazing people.
Imagine that.
We have John Burkett from Feral Star. And we have Higashi from Half of the Crown. All right, welcome guys and ladies. How's it going?
It's going okay. Sorry about I just been doing a lot of events recently and I haven't really unpacked properly.
It's all good.
Whoa, it looks really neat and tidy compared to what's behind me. This is called a comic book studio in action.
Exactly. Cleanliness is not helpful for creativity.
No.
You need everything around you ready to go.
I call it organized chaos in my world.
Exactly. Once you clean up, then you're like, where's that stuff that used to be in that pile on the ground? Yeah. All right, so we're going to talk about i-DOPPELGängER here a little bit. Shelly, let's start talking to you, obviously. When you go to Kickstarter, this isn't the first time, of course. This is the third part of your editing trio. So it seems like you make comics to revolt against like normal comic book stuff. And this time, you know, political opportunities missed for women and other things. So tell us about that. Tell us about the revolt in comics.
Well, it's partly a revolt or a reaction to what's happening in society. And a lot of times that means a political shift. I always say to people, the best projects are about things that irritate you, at least in my experience. And so, Eli, you might remember back in 2016, my first Kickstarter was Femme Magnifique. And that was basically a book saluting 50 magnificent women in pop, politics, art, and science. And I put it together because I was really disappointed by a missed opportunity for a woman to run the White House. So that kind of got me moving in the right direction, and having a crowdfunding platform like Kickstarter was incredible because it made it so easy to kind of like get the message out. And rather than just sit at home and like boo-hoo, so many of my friends in comics were just really angry and negative all the time. I said, let's actually channel that energy into an anthology. So I kind of haven't stopped since 2016. I launched an imprint at IDW with Philip called Black Crown in between. But for the most part, all the personal work that we do through Off Register Press is about making art to represent our times because we fucking have to. Like, you just have to realize that if you don't step up and do it, you might be lost from the history pages. So i-DOPPELGängER is being launched at a time where, big shocker, another missed opportunity for a woman in the White House. And I'm pissed about that. But also, as you probably have noticed, there are a lot of parallels between what happens politically and socially and what happens in comics. And part of me is also just fighting against what I see as going back to the dark ages in the industry. I think my generation should have done better, but that doesn't mean we can't still do better. So I'm all about working with newcomers, being true to my word when it means bringing in a diverse and inclusive group of people to make comics with me. And as I've said many times, the best time to make comics is now. You've got everything at your fingertips, but also no one can stop you, Eli.
Yes, no one. It's the barrier for entry is nothing. Cheers. Raise the tea if you've got it. Welcome to two more Cosmic Lion creators. We have Shaun Riaz and we have Lemnah. Shaun's new book just reached his home base of Trinidad. I'm super psyched that the comics made it that far. Lemnah of Relic Hunter. Relic Hunter 2 is on its way. Solicitation is very, very soon. Adam. I'm just kidding.
Very excited.
And so it's going to be awesome. I'm super psyched for that. So I do want to go to the panel for any questions that anyone has. Let's start with Ro. if you have anything, her face is saying too early.
Well, there was something that's been on my mind and I wasn't sure, again, it's like one of those moments, like, do I make myself small in this situation or not? But I'm in a lot of like web comicking spaces, and I've noticed that like 90% of the people in those spaces are women. And then I go to these in-person indie shows and I see that 90% are men. Maybe there's like a handful of women, like all on one hand, right? And so I was talking to these women online, and I asked them, like, what would it take to get you at these shows? And so a lot of them, I think, just kind of fall back on the security of being like anonymous online, so that they don't have to deal with face-to-face interaction, with sexual harassment, with like a lot of unsolicited advice. And so they feel more comfortable publishing that way. And I thought you hit all the right points about saying like the time is now. And at least I agree that we need to be in those spaces to just kind of challenge the times, because I think representation is really important. So for example, I have 2 daughters, and if I'm bringing them to these shows and they see the majority is mostly men, where overseas, that's different. Like, let's say in Asia, it's almost predominantly women at these in-person shows. And so I just want, I guess, other women to be watching this and feel empowered. And I just wanted to know, I guess, do you have any words for those women online that are really scared to make that jump?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for being a part of this panel and for such an amazing question, because you practically said it all. When I started in comics in 1988, and most of the people on this panel, I know you weren't born then, so thank you again for showing up. But
3 or 4 or 5, probably.
It was kind of like that back in the day. It got better in the 90s. It got better in the early 2000s, and then it got really bad, and now it's worse. So the only way we can actually break up this terrible trend, which is going backwards, is to stick together. We need to make sure that our community is diverse and strong, and that we know what to expect from the handful of people who want to get in our way and trip us up and throw negative things at us and get us to kind of be fearful. So I think that the solution is to do what you guys have been doing. You've been banding together with Cosmic Lion, CLP for the win. And by making sure that there are people at these events who you know and trust, who've got your back, that's how it always is. And that, ironically, is what it means to be a comic book editor too. Because when you're a comic book editor, you are first and foremost a sounding board for the person you're working with, whether that's the writer, penciler, inker, letterer, colorist, cover artist, production person. You are the lifeline, not just to perhaps the company or the printer that's going to actually get the work on paper, but you're the lifeline for taking the idea that started up here in someone's head and making sure that they follow through and finish it. So the solution to that is we just can't get discouraged or give up, because there will always be people who want to see us fall on our faces. And that's kind of what i-DOPPELGANGER is about. It's 50% going up and down the corporate ladder. And I spent 22 and a half years at DC Comics Vertigo, and I had so many amazing good times. And I had so many great collaborators in-house with assistant and associate editors, and a great boss in Karen Berger, who about 93% of the time greenlit my projects. I was lucky. It's also about knowing that comics are a collaboration. And so you have to be able to let your ego go, leave it at the door, and know that your project's going to get better when the editor takes it and passes it down the line. So there's a lot of things afoot in i-DOPPELGANGER, but for the most part, it's 50%. Stuff happens in life and in business, and a lot of it is crap, but you got to keep moving forward. The comics, one of the tenets I like is that you need to follow the forward imperative. We're always working towards the page turn. So you've got to remember to keep doing that in your own work and also in your community and reaching out to people. The other 50% of i-DOPPELGänger is process, because I think everybody who reads comics now wants to make them. Some of us, like me, can't draw. I hold up my hand. But to edit, I need to be able to visualize. You need a strong visual acuity. So as long as you can draw squares and circles, you can make comics. Most of us can do that. And I just want to make sure that it's clear that in i-DOPPELGänger, there will be so much information about how to finally get off your butt, get your idea on the page, and get it in print.
Very well said, of course.
Mic drop.
We got a couple of comments from the YouTube side. Chris Anderson says he's working and he's watching.
I'm glad to know he's working, because he's on the clock with me right now.
Oh, really?
A secret project that I can't say any more about. But Chris, I'm glad that you're joining us, and I'm glad you are admitting that you are working hard, because otherwise I'd have to leave this live AMA right now to kick your butt.
All right, and shout out to Stiff Kittens Reviews. Hi, Shelly, Eli, and Co. What up? Good to see you. All right, sweet. So we have, it's open, everyone in the YouTube. If you have comments, if you have questions, throw them in the comments. And anyone here in the panel, if you're interested and want to ask a question, just raise a hand visually, or whoever wants to go next. Lemnah.
I mean, sure. For me, I can say, I've worked a little bit with Shelly, like, personally. And her skills are absolutely, like, through the roof. I 100%, like, I learned so much working with you, just like what is going to work and what isn't going to work, as far as my book was concerned. And you actually really helped me. One of the things that I definitely wanted to point out was one of the main characters in the second book is a female character, and you really helped me to, like, punch her up and make her a better character, bring her in sooner into the story, make her more of a main character in the next draft and in the subsequent, like, roughs and layouts and pencils and everything. It really came through. She almost dominates the book now, and it's really exciting to me, because my wife is Cuban. She's a Cuban homicide detective. My co-writer Manny is Cuban, and it's really great to get that kind of representation into the book and have a strong female character. The thing for me that was the most important that you told me was, like, that I needed to have her doing something, like, action-oriented and physical at the beginning. And this is why it's so important to have somebody looking at your work, whether it's your friends or an editor or anybody who has a different perspective than you have. And I don't know what your thoughts were about the book. Well, I know a little bit about what you thought about it, but for me, I think that you made it so much better. I don't know if this is a question, more of a comment, but I was really grateful for the help that you gave me. And I think it makes the book so much better, and coming at it from your perspective and listening to you and learning from you has been such a huge thing for me. So all I can say is thank you, and Shelly's the best,
Hey, if my father is going to continue sending you those checks, I'm happy to see that.
No way. It was so helpful, and it was just so, like, it was huge, because it really made me think about it in a different way.
Well, that's
all right. Hey, guys, I actually got a special guest I want to drop into the show here really quickly. He's going to ask a question probably and then get back to work, but here he is. Got Matt Wagner stopping in.
Whoa. Talk about star power. Oh my goodness. Matt, it is so great to see you.
Hi, girl. How are you? I haven't seen you in a while.
I know. I'm doing great. But I don't know. You must have owed Eli some serious favor to stop.
More than we can count.
Whoa. This is massive. How are you?
I'm good. Busy working, writing my next Dracula book with Kelly Jones.
Yeah, that's like the third part you're writing.
Third one.
right?
Yep.
Well, congratulations on your Kickstarters, man. You just what a powerhouse team.
We're
You
traveling
know,
the same road here now, huh?
we are.
Yeah, and
So-
you're on your third book, Shelly, and then
That's
Matt, you're
right.
finishing the third book as well.
So Shell, this is your third book is the end of the Vertigo years, correct?
Well, the third book is the end of the trilogy. So I'm taking it all the way up through present day, because I think what's important is when you come to the end of a very long chapter of your work life, a lot of times people are just like, well, what happened? And like, why would you leave that job? And what happens next? And to me, that's exciting. So I wanted to be sure that I not only covered those Vertigo years, and you were living them. We had some great times together, but there were some things that changed in the late 2000 teens, and I wanted to actually prove to people that even if your career takes an abrupt left turn, it doesn't have to be over. And I tell my students also, I teach comics editing at Portland State, thanks to Diana Schutz, your sister-in-law, your #1 editor in crimes, Matt. And I tell my students that it's just as hard to break in as it is to stay relevant in comics or any job. It's all about reinvention. You kind of have to always continue to step it up. And I'm all about the art form. So I wanted to make sure that i-DOPPELGänger was 50% a look back, 21st century. We all had high expectations, big dreams for what comics could do. A lot of times digital helped us achieve those goals faster. But I think a lot of what I'm imparting on the career side is get over yourself and learn how to pivot, because you are your best investment. You have to really believe in yourself, your instincts, and continue to make comics despite the odds.
And don't limit your interests. Keep a broad open mind so far as not only what you intake, but what you want to create.
Yeah, and I think what's really fun in my story is that, as you know, Matt, I was a real hands-on editor at Vertigo for many years. I was involved in all aspects of the process of getting the idea from the writer's head onto the page. But as I started to do my own work with Philip, we worked on an imprint called Black Crown with IDW. We started to teach ourselves how to actually do the production. And I started to letter comics. Now, I don't recommend this for everyone because it can be really intense, and there is that potential to actually rewrite yourself if you're lettering your own work. But I think it's so important to understand every stage of making comics and what every person on the team actually gets their hands on. You not only learn the parlance, you get respect by understanding what people do for a living all day, especially when you need something from them. So part of i-DOPPELGänger is process, and it shows behind the scenes about how we've evolved, at least since I've been in comics in the late 80s, how things have changed from technology, but also how people management stayed the same. You still need to be a great communicator, and you need to deliver on your promise. And those are two things that if you don't put those first and foremost, you're probably done, because people won't respect you and you won't be accountable.
Matt, do you have any stories from working with Shelly back in the day that maybe go towards this?
Well, in this time period you're talking about, it was when we were doing Madame Xanadu, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So that was a lot of fun. That last run particularly, where we assembled a group of 6 different female cartoonists who were all dramatically different stylistically, and that was a lot of fun making that all happen and come to fruition.
It was epic, and I really enjoyed working with you on that, because you and I pretty much looked at all the women that were working in the field, and we hired people that were, some of them were new to comics, some of them might have been their first or second job.
Yep.
And we went out of our way to do that. And that's exactly what I do now as, someone who runs a very small bespoke publishing company for her personal work. I go out of my way to find really talented, inspired, and enthusiastic young people to work with me on my projects. So for instance, like in i-DOPPELGänger, there will be the occasional story drawn by a Vertigo veteran. So we'll have a Mark Buckingham short story. We have a David Hahn short story, who you guys might know from Bike Club. But most of the book is illustrated by two young women who are 26 years old, which is critical to me because at 26, when I started at DC Comics, that's how old I was. And it was when my whole life changed. So it was important to me to hire young people and to kick their butts. These two women, Imogen Mangle and Lindsay Thomason, who goes by Art by Lid, both pretty much right out of art school, had nothing published in print, but had some web comics and definitely had the chops. You know, I felt like they both really had massive skills, but they never worked with a comic book editor who would tap them on the back and say, hey, let's step it up. Let's look at this from a different perspective. So that's what you're also getting in i-DOPPELGänger, is you're watching these two brilliant artists evolve before your eyes. And that's teamwork.
Yeah, the thing that a lot of young creators don't quite get till they start working on a full publication schedule is the amount of focus and the amount of just sheer effort it takes. It's a lot of effort, you know. It's a lot of work.
Something that
go ahead. Yep.
Matt, one of the things you told me once, and I'm not sure when, it could have been in 1989 or it could have been while we were working on Madame Xanadu. You always said that a monthly artist has to make a lot of quick decisions. You look at the page and there are going to be a series of panels on a page, and they're not all going to be award-winning art jobs. You got to pick one and you say, this is going to be the gem. This is the beauty. The other ones are going to be good, but you got to stay on deadline. Because if you can't finish a page in a day and a half, you're not going to get those monthly jobs, or you're going to get them and you're not going to keep them. So that's advice, Matt, that I've shared with students and with friends and with creators for years and years. Now, did I make that up, or do you recall telling me that?
No, yeah, that's part of it. I mean, my greatest training when I was up and coming, when I was still in school, I worked in college. I worked on the college newspaper, and I was their graphic artist, which meant 2 nights a week I had to, when they were going to press Wednesday and Sunday, I had to show up at the offices around 9 o'clock at night, and they already had the paper laid out. And anywhere there wasn't an ad or a photo or a story, I had to do a spot illustration to fill in that spot. And they'd usually have kind of a recommendation of what they wanted. But for the first time in my life, drawing not because I wanted to, but because I had to. And I couldn't leave till all that shit was done every night. And that really was boot camp for learning how to let stuff go. You know, like, all right, that's not the greatest thing I ever drew, but serves its purpose. On to the next one, you know? And that thing you're talking about there, Shell, on each page is you know, a variation of vignetting, which in classical painting is choosing the one spot. Rembrandt was great at this, choosing the one spot you're going to render the hell out of. And the rest is just kind of more gestural. And in comics, I think it's just crucial. You have to choose that, move on, choose it, move on, you know, and you'll get better next time. The next one will be better. That's what every comic artist has to tell themselves every single page, every single day. Next one will be better.
Yes. I think a big part of the problem with comics today is that fear of finishing. You know, we live in this age of instant information and everybody wants to be instantly amazing. And the only way to really grow as a person, especially in comics, is by committing your idea to the page, getting it done, and moving on to the next panel or the next comic. That's the only way it works. And I think that's why some of the monthlies at Vertigo were so riveting and amazing, because we didn't have time to panic or overthink sometimes. You know, we planned in advance. So we definitely had good structure and organizational systems set up. So we would be sure we would launch at a certain time, so we knew we'd have to be ready. But I think that's not what we see today anymore with modern publishers. Everybody wants to be perfect right out of the gate. And to me, that takes all the joy out of urgent art. And I might as well say this while you're still here, Matt, but the first time I saw the Clash perform live, 1981, Erga Music War, I saw Joe Strummer, on rhythm guitar, and I thought, I want to be like that one day. I want to make art that represents a generational thinking, like a way of life. Now, I tried to play guitar 3 times, did not work. So I had to go elsewhere. And I don't know, comics just welcomed me in. And you were a big part of that, Matt. When I first started working at Comico, I was 22. I was a goth girl right out of college. And the whole staff at Comico was so nice to me and just welcomed me in and showed me the ropes. And I'll always be grateful for that.
I think comics have always had that kind of punk rock aesthetic, even back to the 40s. There was nothing precious about it, Get it down, get it out, get it down, get it out, make up stuff. Just pull shit out of your head, And if it's going to be a little bit sloppy, so what? It's going to be powerful. And
Exactly.
Sorry, say it again.
I said exactly, because the greatest thing we have about making comics is that anyone can do it at any time. All you need is a writing utensil, whether that's a red pen or a pencil, and something to write on, which could be your table, a piece of paper, your hand. There you go. I mean, you have no excuse. And that's the kind of attitude I want people to have when they start reading i-DOPPELGänger. Because yes, it's going to be sort of a walk through the timelines. Each chapter has 4 pages of highlights from 2000, all the way through the years of books I worked on and some funny anecdotes and maybe some lost projects or some people who I wanted to work with so badly, but their pitches didn't get approved. Got stuff like that. But it also has a look at sort of what our work life has become and how it's evolved from, certainly for me, working in a big office in a big major city, which was a blast, working with a lot of people, a lot of moving parts, to now being on the other side. I'm more like a freelancer. So I know what it's like to sit at home in my pajamas, trying to get myself to work every day. It is not easy. And so I do understand and commiserate with all of my freelancers who would dread that phone call from me like, hey, where's the work you owe me? Come on, we got to hit the deadline.
Everybody on that end of it just has to take the same. They have to consider that they are in an office, even if they're not. You know what I mean? It is your job. You're showing up for your job, and you have to deliver the same way if your boss was sitting there right across the room and looking at you across his desk. It's no different. You still have to produce.
And I think the best way to get out of a bad mentality, because I do think a lot of people come to the table, they say, I want to make comics, I'm going to do it, this is my year. You got to set up a plan. You have to come up with a way to challenge yourself and get yourself to do it. And whatever that is for you, whether that's once a month you go out for a really nice dinner. By the way, Matt, I hear you're a tremendous cook. Eli said you made lots of meals and you forced him to drink your favorite whiskey when he was visiting.
Oh yeah, forced. Held his mouth open and poured it down liberally. Yeah.
I'm just saying what he told me. But one of the things I have in i-DOPPELGänger, and Matt, I don't know if you do this because you never seem to be out of ideas, but I have a whole section about prompts. Like, how do you trick yourself into getting your big ideas onto one page? And I've got two things in particular. I like to deal with lines and grids. I'm a big fan of like the 4-panel grid, and I call it 4 chambers. And I basically am going to be explaining to people how to isolate everything that's jumbled in your head involving one subject, how to take the 4 key components that absolutely have to be in the story, or why bother? So that's part of i-DOPPELGänger too. And it's how to work with the 9-panel grid, not just in telling a hey amateur story, which I love the 1-page, how to explain something in 1 page, 9 panels, but it's how to use those grids to structure your life and your day, and how to get to the next day and finish up a lot of the work that you set out to do in the morning. So it's going to be advice like that too. Practical working advice and editing advice, and also people management.
You showed me that when we were working together, Shelly, and I still use it. Like segmenting, whether it's your day, your week, your month, your year, into those like 9 panels. It's amazing because then it's like you're thinking in comics, but then you're also like organizing everything. That was a huge thing.
Something I did for years and years and years earlier in my career. I don't so much anymore, just because I've been at this shit so long that it's just kind of ingrained at this point. But when I was working on an issue, so let's say it's 22 pages, I would, on a smaller sheet of paper, I would come up with a pie chart of just very small, maybe 1 inch by 2 inches rectangles lined up, all 22 of them. And then I would just go through and just jot down in a word or two what happens on that page. And then I see the story as a flow chart. You can see how many pages you're committing to this and how much you're committing to this and where you begin and where you end up, you know. And making charts like that really helps, I think. It really can focus you in ways that if you just leave it amorphous, it doesn't come to you so easily. And again, I don't do that so much anymore, but boy, I did it for years and years and years.
And I think it's so true. I always try to explain to people, like, even though we're in the digital age and it's so easy to grab the note section of your phone, the best comics land on the page for a reason. They're in print. You want to hold them. And so I also recommend making your own dummy book. Mm-hmm. So this is actually chapter 1 of i-DOPPELGänger, believe it or not. Like I said, not an artist. Wish I could play guitar and draw. 2 things I can't do. But Matt, can you tap dance?
No.
That I can do. I can still twirl a baton.
But I think of you every time I see somebody do it, Shell.
Right? So this is how i-DOPPELGänger started. So these are my chapters. Yep. And in each chapter, it's 20-page chapters. I've got 4 pages of a timeline. I've got a confirm deny, where I ask some writers and artists I make ridiculous statements that may or may not be true. They pick one and they either agree, they confirm or deny it or debunk it. And so I absolutely must say that if you want to make comics, remember that they start not just in your head, but on the page. And when we make comics, we are building a book. So this is a dummy book. This is also i-DOPPELGänger. I tend to get a cheap folder, and I start by putting together my chapters. So for me, this is useful because every day I see my own progress. So I start with blank pages that become script pages that then become the layouts and the roughs, and then the pencils, lettering, inks. So I'm building the book. And these are all things that are going to be included in i-DOPPELGänger, because what I didn't want to do, Matt, and you know me pretty well, I didn't want it to be a bittersweet or nasty manifesto.
Yeah, I wouldn't expect that out of you anyway. So
it's not a tell-all. It's how did I make these comics? Well, I edited over 25,000 pages, and I had a lot of help, because if I had to say there's one word to describe comics, and I'm going to ask Matt what your one word would be, mine is liquid, because nothing is finished until we hit the print button. So the editor can make changes at many different stages. That's part of the urgency of making comics. That's what makes it exciting. That's what makes a Clash song so amazing, is it's just propulsive until it has to go to press.
I guess my one word would be intimate.
Yes.
It used to be, we would look at comics and try and figure out what's the difference between comics and film. Well, in comics, you can draw everything. You can have anything happen. You can have Superman pushing a planet. You can have any bit of magic, any bit of surreality become real. And now with CGI, that happens in film all the time. But film is more of a, you sit down and you watch what is given to you. Whereas holding a comic, the tactile quality of holding a comic, turning the page, there's an intimacy there that really, I always talk about how, for people that aren't comics fans, when you can find that one comic that turns them, that intimacy reaches deep inside of them and grabs hold of their imagination, and they're going to want more, And Shell, talk about your from rough to finish approach there. I have done a lot of in-class presentations, done it for Diana's class many times. where I go and I do a like a PowerPoint thing and show stuff from all throughout my career, and it's all very finished looking stuff, cover paintings, interior pages, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then I put a drawing up on a projector of this goofy little character I came up with. And I asked all the students in the class to rip off a sheet of paper and to write real quick one sentence of either something about this character or something that happens to this character. And we throw it all in a hat, and on overlays, I draw it right on the spot. And we pull them out of the hat one by one, and it looks like shit. It doesn't look anything like this very fancy stuff. This very accomplished professional stuff I just showed them. And the point is, look, that blank page might scare you, but everything you just saw started like this.
Exactly.
It's rough.
I love that.
Rough, just get it down sort of attitude,
What a great exercise. What a genius idea. Was that your idea or Diana's idea to do that?
Yep.
I love it. I love it. I hope you'll come into my classroom at Portland.
Yeah. The one thing I learned after the first time was actually the first time I did it was years ago. We did this, the CBLDF did a fundraising cruise, and I did it on the cruise. And I learned immediately after that to make sure I say, write down one short sentence, because you have all these writers in the room. Some of them were putting down a whole paragraph, I can't draw that right now.
Definitely. No, that's such a great exercise. Does anyone have any questions for Matt? He's our celebrity guest, and I don't want to.
Oh, looks like Ro's got one. Go ahead, Ro.
So I just wanted to preface this question by saying my biggest supporters in all of this, especially my in-print career, has been all of the guys that you see here today. They've been my biggest ralliers, and they're the people that I can go to whenever, I have questions or concerns. And I guess my question for you, Matt, is what's your advice for, I guess, other men in the industry to also support the women that also are thinking of breaking into it?
Well, it shouldn't be that fucking hard, should it? I mean, all these men that you're talking about, they have women in their lives that they love, and it's not. I'm sure it's not hard for them to show support for those women in everyday fashion. So I don't know. Just look at women's work and ask them questions. And again, I just don't think it's that hard, or it shouldn't be,
And if you have anything to add to that, Shelly, I would love to hear what you have to say too.
Well, I pretty much stand by what Matt said. I mean, I find it absolutely ridiculous that in 2024, we've gone back to the dark ages here. And Matt was in comics even before I arrived on the scene in 1988. So, he knows, like, there were times at early shows where, you kind of didn't want to walk around because there weren't other people like you. There were few women. In the 90s, it got better, and a lot of people came into comics because of books like Sandman and Sandman Mystery Theater, where there were strong female protagonists. Matt wrote one of them in Diane Belmont, who I think, probably doesn't get as much credit as Death of the Endless, but Diane was a fierce female protagonist. And I think we started bringing in more female readers who weren't just girlfriends of comic fans. It's exposure. We need to keep pounding the pavement, and we won't give up. Just like I said earlier, we've got, politics, another missed opportunity for a woman to be in the White House and be in charge. And, I don't want to end this on a loaded statement, but I think there's a lot to be said about how people in business are sometimes intimidated by women in charge. And that just frankly sucks, because I think we need to view people as equals on every level. And I think women get a bad reputation of being cranky or bitchy or rude when all we're doing is getting shit done.
Like, men are none of those things.
Oh, of course not. They just aren't, right? I think we just can't give up on any of this. And I think the more that we just,
I will say, you see the sea change though in the industry. There's far more when you go to a con. I don't do that many cons these days, but when you go to a con, you see far more female curators, far more attendees, far more enthusiasts, fans. You know, when I started, boy, it was the boys' club. You know, girls didn't read comics at all. But that's just utterly changed. You know, I mean, a part of that is more female creators providing them the sort of stories they want to read. You know, and male creators too. But the sea change is there. It's happening.
I think the one thing that we still need to keep pushing in the right direction, Matt, and I don't know if you're as up to speed on a lot of these smaller publishers that are out there. A new crop of indie publishers have sort of been dotting the landscape, and most of them are run by middle-aged white guys. No offense, because there are a lot of those people here today, but they are making comics that they want to read for other middle-aged white guys. And I'm just saying that because it's the truth. And these people have the opportunity to hire women at a certain level as editors, as VPs, as executive editors, editors-in-chief, and they don't. They hire their friends. So what I'm also trying to do with i-DOPPELGänger is empower people to make their own comics anyway, because I have faced every type of rejection in the marketplace since leaving Vertigo, and I just couldn't let it get me down. And I want people to read this chapter, and when they close the book, I want them to feel emboldened to carve their own path. And whether that path is to kind of work for a big company and start a new division that is more diverse and inclusive and friendly to people that don't get the opportunities that a lot of us have had, even myself. I just want people to finish the book and feel like I'm making comics now. And whether it's a full-time job or it's a hobby, doesn't matter. It's your way to leave your mark in the history pages and feel like you've lived a life to your standards, and it's a life well lived, and that we pass on this industry to the next generation and do better than our generation has done. That's what i-DOPPELGänger is really about.
I would truly say that any creator needs to have all three of your books on the shelf next to Burn
And again,
Hogarth and
I
all
want to
those.
thank my dad for sending you that monthly check, Eli. I mean, I know.
Actually, I've been putting shifts in at the laundromat, Shelly. It's not
Okay, all right.
Hey,
Good
and I wanted, in reference to what we were just talking about there, I guess I've just been lucky over the course of my entire career. The vast majority of editors I've worked with have been three particular women: Diana, Karen, and you.
Yep. Well, and you know, a lot of that has to do with talent. But you know what, Matt? Another big part of working in comics and having longevity is you're a hell of a nice person. And I think there's something that
I might not agree, but okay.
Like you don't sometimes learn in art school that you kind of need to be pleasant. You need to get stuff done. You need to take direction. You need to apply the notes, and you need to be enjoyable to work with. And there are a lot of people who are not. So you have the talent, but you need the temperament too. And Matt, you have always been a great team player and collaborator, even though, like, you know, whether you're writing or whether you're being a cartoonist and you're writing and drawing, you have always been inclusive and welcomed everyone onto the team. Everybody's at the same level, and that's part of the collaboration. And so that's something that I don't think a lot of people in today's marketplace understand. So many people are just writing and drawing their own stuff, and that's amazing. I totally think that's important. But when you have a community like CLP, you are now getting free advice and welcome advice from people who are experiencing the highs and lows of making comics with you. So that's important too. And also just remember that, as my dad would say, be nice. It doesn't cost you anything.
All right, we got a question. Okay,
I guess the one thing I would add to that is it's just it's endemic of comics in particular. You talked about people doing their own thing there, and then the larger teams. The one vast truth about comics is there ain't no right way to do it. You know what I mean? There's so many different variations. There's so many different ways to produce. I've never met any creator that does stuff exactly the way I do, you know, and that's one of the thrills, you know. I mean, certainly I think in music there tends to be, you know, there tends to be a certain way you play music, you know.
Yeah.
But in comics,
formula.
it's just everybody comes at it from a different angle. Everybody concocts it differently. Everybody arrives at the end in a different fashion, you know, and that's part of its great strength.
And I think you just mentioned another operative word in making comics, the end. I always say to people, when you come up with your brilliant idea, always know your ending. You might not know how you're going to get there, and that's the fun of writing it or drawing it, but always at least have a good idea of where the goalpost is. And if it does change, if your characters push you in a different way, that's okay. That's also why it's nice to have an editor as your running mate, because sometimes the editor is going to tap you on the back and say, that's a tangent that actually is going to get you off course. Let's stick with the plan, or maybe you will come up with something better. But I think it's important to really know at least what's on the horizon, if not a definitive, this person dies at the end because I want revenge.
Yeah, because sometimes you do discover things as you go along. You know, it's not. Here's a funny tale about the different ways to create things. So many years ago, I was in England for a con, and I spent a night at Alan Moore's house. And this is when he was working on Big Numbers, his self-published project that never finished its way out, never came to full fruition. And he took me up into his writing room, and he had one of those giant sketch pads, 18 by 24 or so. And Big Numbers was famously going to be 10 issues. I think they only got 3 out.
Yep, I got him all backed and boarded.
So he had 10 columns this way for each issue, and then let's say there were 30 characters. Then he had 30 rows this way, and in each square, in each issue, he had, in the tightest, most psychotic little handwriting I'd ever seen, everything that happened to that character in that issue, you know? And I just looked at it and said, dude, you and I don't work alike at all. Because I'm much more like, if anybody has ever read Stephen King's memoir On Writing, he talks about how he's not a copious note taker. He's not a great planner. He comes up with an idea, a core idea. He comes up with characters, and then he just kind of follows the characters around through the story. And I'm much more like that. But the point, that just stresses again what I said. There is no right way to do it. You know, it all works out in the end.
And I think what's exciting is when you challenge yourself to start small and maybe do a couple of 1-page or 3 or 4-page stories and try out different methods. Something else that I think is really cool. I was once talking to Kelly Sue DeConnick, and she said that her husband, Matt Fraction, actually started writing by reverse engineering a favorite short story. So he tried to figure out, what did the writer ask for to be drawn on the page? And that's how he started to kind of begin to understand how to write comics, which I always thought was a great example. Because most times people don't even realize that a comic book writer is not just responsible for writing the dialogue and the captions, but they're responsible for writing the art direction. So I always say to new writers, especially from
sometimes, not always.
Okay, sorry. Sometimes not always. I always say to writers,
there is no right way to do it.
Yeah. But the point I just wanted to make is I often say to writers, what do you want to see drawn on the page? That's a really important question a great editor will ask a writer, because so often it's like, oh, I have this scene where this person says this or that or does this, does that. What are we going to see drawn on the page? That's what an editor is also trying to get.
One thing a writer does need to consider is the fact that it's not just your words. There's a visual element here too. So every page needs to have something interesting, something going on in some fashion, you know, whether that is just a depiction or an action or a mood. But they need to consider, at least in that regard, you're right there, Shell, with the art direction thing.
I also think that for me, comics are about what to say, what to show, and what to let the reader deduce.
Yep.
Between the panel borders, and those things happen sometimes in the editing. And that's where I feel like comic book editors needed to the role of the comic book editor needed to be demystified, which is what I hope I did in Filth and Grammar. And in i-DOPPELGänger, I want to continue with that observation, if you will, because I always felt like the editor never got enough credit. And the editor wears a lot of hats, does a lot of tap dancing, and ultimately gets the work to the reader's hands. Like you said, it's the intimacy of comics that you like. And that is true. You have that tactile experience to hold open a comic. You can close it when you want. You can go back and discover new things in it. Because Matt, I know with your work, and I'm just going to give you a shout out, my gateway drug to comics was Grendel 16 and 17. The point of no return. When I read those books, Matt, are you crying? Are you weeping over it?
No.
You know that.
Looking at a screen makes my eyes water after a while. I'm old, Shell.
Hey, I'm a little younger than you, but I'm catching up. But just for anybody who's watching and listening, this is full circle for me for Matt to show up here, because I discovered comics in college, 1987, went into the comic book store, picked up Grendel, read Grendel, and practically fainted. Could not believe that there was something in a comic book that was so intelligent, erudite, beautifully drawn, challenged my thinking, and did not involve naked women running around in high heels. So thank you, Matt. Your work got me here. It's your fault.
Sorry.
All right, we got a comment here. We got a question from the YouTube. We have 8 minutes left on the thing. So we have a question here from Anton. On the note of industry changes, what do you feel is the best way that creators can navigate those big changes as they come? Or how have you done it in the changes too that you've seen in the course of your careers?
I'm not the best one to ask here.
Because you carved your own.
I'll just chime in.
Yeah.
I'll chime in and just say, look, you just have to be aware of the marketplace. So the number one thing I tell to people, whether you want to work for one of the big companies because you love mainstream comics, or whether you want to work for an indie company or you want to self-publish, know the market, know your audience. You really want to take a pretty broad view of what's being published today and what's been published over the past few decades, because knowledge is power. And if there's someone whose work you really respect, find out more than a few cursory things about them. Go to conventions and talk to people who are making comics. Now, sometimes that's intimidating, but I can assure you, and the way that Matt joined us today, which was such a treat. So thank you, Matt, for like surprising us as our celebrity guest. But like, you can see just hearing Matt talk, like he remembers the days when he was going to conventions and he was in art school. And, you know, everybody started in a similar way. You know, sometimes we get lucky breaks, but most of the time we roll up our sleeves and we pound the pavement. So
another great thing about comics, you can do that. You can go to a convention and meet your favorite creators pretty damn easily. You can't do that in the music biz. You can't do that in film for the most part. You know, everything there is usually at arm's length. But you can go and actually talk to your favorite creators at a Comic-Con, which is, again, lends itself to that sense of intimacy that I was talking about.
It's so true. And I think for the most part, most people are happy to speak with you. We've all been there where we're coming up and we're, you know, have the day job and do comics in the late night hours. And the other thing that I tell students, especially because as I've been teaching comics editing, I'm meeting a lot of young writers and poets and artists who just want to break into the business and get a hit series, you know, and that doesn't happen often, you know, like becoming a pop star. It's 1 in a million. I say to people, go to conventions, but bring some cash in your pocket, because if someone is going to give you their time and answer your questions, you should be supporting them back. So if you're kind of tight on money, buy a sticker or buy a zine from them, a couple of dollars. It's worth your investment in their work. And then it becomes worthwhile for them to share their experience, to help you on the path. So, you know, it works both ways. industry changes, you know, it's hard to predict. Comics has always been a very volatile business. I feel like it's never quite grown up in the sense that we still have a very antiquated system of distribution, and we still overall have a very antiquated hierarchy of how you get to the top of the ladder in a corporate structure. That probably isn't going to change. You know, big business continues to eat itself, but where you can change is grassroots. You can come in on the ground floor. You can make your own comics. If you really can't draw, and that's me, marry your favorite comic book artist. That doesn't mean he's going to work for you. He's working on his own things. But
well, advice there, Shell.
it is good advice, but I will mention something that's worked for me in recent years. And Adam Lemnah, who spoke earlier about a project that he worked on, Relic Hunter, Adam and I did a great thing. We bartered. We gave each other time. So Adam helped me out on my last project by doing some video clips for me. He's a great film and video editor. And I think he clocked in 8 hours of doing some work for me. I gave him 8 hours of editing. So that's a great trade-off. Yeah. And if you can find people in your community to do that, it's a great way to get shit done without spending a lot of money and building that great community of people who, like you, just want to get their message out and just want to tell a story that's worth telling.
Best 8 hours I ever gave to anybody for anything ever.
Wow.
10 times.
Once again,
side partner. Can't ask for better than that.
No.
Once again, I'm going to say that this presentation was brought to you by my father, Mickey Roberg, who's got a big fat checkbook, and he's been writing checks to everyone who is saying nice things about me today. Thank you all.
Mickey doesn't need to pay us to speak these kind words, Shell, because
he actually enjoys it. He enjoys it.
I'll tell you too, a big change in comics is definitely Kickstarter, as we can see with the success of Matt's books and your books, and you know all the ones Cosmic Lion have done. And I'll tell you, Shelley, the Kickstarter for this new book, it's really well done. Like, it's amazingly laid out, and like clearly, I think we all know that you think and put a lot of your heart into all this stuff, but like, you know, not everyone puts the time and effort into it. Like, you have drawings and these captions, the ladders. Like, when I was going through it last night, it's just like really, really thoughtfully laid out. And so like you can see that if like you put the effort into the Kickstarter, it's clearly going to be in the books. So I think that everyone needs to get out there and back this one.
Well, thank you so much. Listen, I want to share just for the room, I want to share something that's really cool. It's a stretch goal. So we really got to like hit the ground running to get this. But I've come up with this idea, and it's a teaching tool because I can't help myself. If I don't work with an assistant editor anymore, and I miss that. I miss that one-on-one working with someone in tandem, and so I can't help myself but want to create things that will also show process and show you how easy it is. So one of the stretch goals is to get an 11 by 17 poster, and this is by the tremendous talent Art by Lid, who is one of my main artists, 26. She's going to be the next superstar in comics, mark my words. So this is a great page from the short story in the book. Here's the back, and it's process. It's how we got there. It's a little bit on the roughs. It's a little bit on the script. It's a little bit of two of us talking about it. And what I do, thank you. I score it, and I put it in a nice clear bag, so that you can either put it on your wall if you want, or you can refer to it as a resource to remind yourself that there are steps and stages to making comics. You got to just throw yourself in it. Get your hands dirty. That's the filth and grammar. It's getting red ink on your hands or black ink on your hands if you're Matt. One of the greatest inkers, Matt, I think you're one of the greatest graphic designers in comics. And one day I want to get the secret to the success that you've had in spotting blacks. Because your compositions and your high contrast, I think, can't be rivaled. Unless it's with the person I married, who is my favorite artist.
Got to keep strokes close to home there.
I had a qualifier there. But Matt, one day I would love to hear you speak about how you approach composition and spotting blacks on a page, because that is as important to me as the copy and the reading order.
I don't know that I'm a great teacher in that regard, so I don't know if that'll ever happen. I tend to do things pretty instinctually. I'm an instinctual storyteller as well. And it's mainly because I read a lot, you know. I mean, that's intake is a big part, you know. You have to read. You really can't be a writer or a creator if you're not absorbing the same medium that you're expressing yourself in.
It's great advice. Be well-rounded, I think, as a creator, and your work will show it.
Yep.
I hate to do this, but Shelly, you say you had a heart out. It's 2 p.m. right now. It's whatever it is on the West Coast.
2 on the East Coast, yeah.
11 on
11,
the West
yes.
Coast. Thank you so much, Eli, for
Absolutely.
running the show here. This has been so much fun. Thanks to all the CLP crew who joined us, and I would love to come back with my artist.
Yeah, represent.
I want to come back with one of the artists on i-DOPPELGänger in a couple weeks. You guys game for that?
Yes, let's do it.
Yes, please.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Please check out my Kickstarter. It's going to be on the screen or in the replies, so you can just click right on the link and share with your friends. And let's kick it up and let's get this book funded. We've got a little bit under $5,000 to go. Matt, you going to talk me up to your friends and family?
Sure, send me. I'll post.
Awesome. Thanks. Bye, everybody.
See you later, guys. Thank you again so much. Cosmic.
Hey, Eli, before we shut off the recording.
Oh, okay. Hold on. All right.